Frank Meller knew the collectors weren't bluffing when the letter said property seizure. He'd seen the exact wording before on the other people's doors back when he was still welding full-time and fixing trucks on weekends. Now it was on his kitchen table, sitting beside his late wife's hospital bill like a second gravestone. $50,000. That was the number the insurance didn't cover, the number that stayed after all the phone calls and appeals and polite promises. Frank was 70, widowed, and living in a small Ohio house that was already half held together with screws and stubbornness. His pension covered groceries and hid if nothing went wrong. Something always went wrong. The roof patch needed a real repair, the old pickup needed brakes, and the debt. The debt felt like a hand around his throat, tightening every time the mailbox creaked open. Frank didn't have kids he could lean on, not anymore. They weren't bad people, but life had pulled them away and pride did the rest. So he did what he'd always done. He worked. Not a job with the boss, work he could control. Municipal auctions, abandoned cars from impound lots. He'd showed up with $200, buy a dead sedan no one wanted, drag it home, straight it down, and sell it the metal. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept him upright. Some weeks he made enough to keep the lights on, some weeks he didn't. When notice came saying a sheriff could show up to take property, Frank looked around his garage and realized he was running out of parts to sell and excuses to tell himself. That's when he saw it on the city auction list. An old rusted camper, early 80s, as his own deceased, not family claim. It looked like junk on wheels, the kind that sat behind barns until sank into the ground. But to Frank, junk had value. Aluminum, copper wire, steel frame, maybe an old generator, maybe tools somebody forgot, enough to buy time. He wanted cheap because no one wanted to tow it. And towing alone nearly ate his last cash. Still, he brought it home and parked it beside his garage like a tired animal he didn't have the heat to pull down. He started cutting it apart the next morning, moving slow, careful, like his body was made of hinges. The inside smelled like dust and years. Everything was brittle, sun-faded, and sad. Broken cabinet doors, stained cushions, old magazines stuck together. Frank kept telling himself not to hope for a miracle. Miracles weren't for men like him. But then his grinder hit a section of interior wall that didn't sound right. Not hollow, not solid, wrong. Like there was something soft behind the panel instead of insulation. He stopped, stared, and cut a wider opening. A strip of yellowed foam peeled back, and he saw sealed vacuum packs stitched inside the insulation, stacked flat and tight like someone had built them into the camper on purpose. Frank's mouth went dry. He reached in and pulled one pack free. It was heavy in a way cash isn't and tools aren't dense, cold way that told the truth before your eyes do. Through the clear plastic, he saw a dull gold glow, then a sharp edge, then a stamped face on a coin that looked older than his whole life. He tore the pack open with shaking fingers and spilled a handful into his palm. Gold coins, not new, not shiny novelty stuff, old gold, the kind collectors talk about in whispers. And deeper in the wall, more packs, thicker ones, holding what looked like watches in protective sleeves. Frank stood there in his driveway with his heart punching his ribs, realizing two things at once. This wasn't extra money, this was a hidden stash somebody protected for decades. And if it was hidden that hard, somebody might still believe it belongs to them. Frank didn't take the coins inside right away. He stood by the camper with his hands shaking, listening to the normal sounds of the streets, birds, a lawnmower, 2 houses down, trying to make his brain accept what his eyes had already proven. He pulled 2 more vacuum packs from the wall, more gold coins. Then a soft pouch with watches wrapped in closed sleeves. Frank knew enough to know this wasn't yard sale value. This was life-changing value. The kind that fixes a roof, kills a debt, and buys peace. The kind that also brings trouble if the wrong person hears about it. He did the only thing he trusted, he did it plain sight. Frank rolled the coins and watches back into the insulation cavity, tapped the panel shut, and showed a pile of rotted cushions in front of like it was just continuing demolishing. Then he drove to the bank and rented a small safe deposit box under his name, not because he planned to do anything fancy, but because he needed one place in his life that could not be rummaged through by the accident. That night, he barely slept. His mind kept replaying one sentence like a warning: if someone hit it this hard, someone else might come looking. 2 days later, it started. A black SUV eased up to Frank's curb like it belonged there. A well-dressed man stepped out, late 50s, confident smile, clean shoes that never touched real dirt. He introduced himself as Leon Adler, a local investor. He spoke like a neighbor, but his eyes kept flicking toward the camper. Leon said the camper used to belong to a family friend and asked if Frank would sell it back today, cash. He even held up an envelope, 2,000, he said, like he was doing Frank a favor. Frank kept his face flat and told him no. Leon didn't argue, he just smiled wider and said, "If you change your mind, you'll have my number." Then he left an expensive card on Frank's porch rail and drove off like the whole thing was casual. The next morning, a city truck stopped outside Frank's place. A municipal inspector walked into the garage like he'd been invited. He pointed at code violations Frank had lived with for years: an old extension cord, a cracked concrete edge, a shelf not properly anchored. The inspector talked about fines like he was reading a menu. Frank tried to stay calm, but the message was loud even without threats. Somebody was turning the screws. Leon couldn't legally take the camper, so he was making Frank's life painful until he caved. Frank realized the worst part wasn't fear, it was time. He didn't have weeks to play chess. Collectors didn't wait. The inspector didn't wait, so Frank made a hard choice that felt ugly but necessary. He stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like a mechanic. Isolate the problem, move fast, leave no loose wires. He had the camper towed to a scrapyard the same afternoon and cited it over as junk. No more object for anyone to fight him over. Whatever mattered was already out. Then he went to a coin shop an hour away in a town where nobody knew him, carrying only one coin and one watch. The owner, a careful man behind bulletproof glass, didn't laugh when Frank set them down. He went quiet. He checked the coin, checked the watch, then looked up and said, "You have more of these." It wasn't a question. Frank didn't answer. The owner slid a form across the counter and asked for Frank's driver's license. "Standard procedure," he said, "for our records." Frank hesitated, then handed it over because he needed the price and he needed it now. The owner typed Frank's information into the computer, printed a receipt, and made a strong offer for the single coin. Frank took the receipt and walked out feeling half relieved, half sick. In his truck, he stared at the paper and realized something that made his stomach drop. Leon Adler didn't find him by magic. Frank had just handed his name and address to a stranger with a keyboard. And as Frank started the engine, his phone buzzed with a new text from an unknown number. "Smart man, let's talk about who you really pulled out of that camper." Frank didn't answer the text. He sat in his truck with the receipt in his hands and felt something older than fear settle in. Combat training without the uniforms. Don't argue, don't explain, don't let the other guy set the rules. He drove home, parked the truck, and did what he'd avoided for years because it felt too expensive. He called the local attorney who handled estates and property disputes. The woman didn't sound shocked when Frank said gold coins and random guy claiming family. She sounded tired. "People lie when money appears," she said. "If you act alone, you'll get squeezed. If you act through paperwork, they usually disappear." The same day, Frank filed a simple complaint about the inspector's supervised visit and asked for everything in writing. The next morning, he went back to the coin shop and told the owner, calm and firm, that he wanted his license info removed from their system unless required by law, and that he was not discussing any larger sale without legal counsel. The owner's face tightened. He wasn't used to customers pushing back. Frank realized the shop wasn't just a shop, it was a funnel. A place where quiet fines got noticed and noticed fines got passed along. Leon Adler showed up again that afternoon, still smiling, still acting friendly. He didn't threaten Frank, he didn't have to. He just stood up by a driveway and said, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Frank stared back and said one sentence he'd practiced with the attorney: "All contacts go through my counsel. If you step on my property again, it will be documented." Leon's smile didn't drop, but his eyes did. He turned and walked away like he'd lost interest. That was the tell. Men who are just making offers don't keep coming back. With the attorney's help, Frank stopped trying to cash out fast. He didn't dump coins at random shops. He didn't chase the biggest number in a parking lot. He took the stash to a wedded rare coin dealer 2 counties over, an older guy with an office, cameras, and a reputation. The dealer didn't wink, he didn't whisper, he checked dates, weights, and condition like it was routine, then said the words Frank needed more than the money. These are real and they are valuable. He also said the part that saved Frank's life: we do this clean, documented sale, taxes handled, no games. If anyone claims it, you have a paper trail. Over the next months, the goal turned into something Frank hadn't felt in years. Breathing room, not overnight riches, but steady, serious money. When the final numbers added up, Frank sat at his kitchen table and stared at the total like it was written in another language. Enough to wipe out the medical debt that had haunted his wife's name, enough to stop the collector letters for good, enough to fix the roof properly, replace the truck brakes, and put a real heater in the house before winter came back around. He didn't celebrate with a shopping spree. His first luxury was paying the hospital balance in one clean payment and watching the account show zero. His second was fixing the porch steps his late wife had asked him to fix for years. He replaced the cracked boards, repainted the rail, and sat there one evening with a cup of coffee, feeling like he'd finally kept a promise instead of breaking one. Then Frank did the part that felt even harder than dealing with Leon. He called his son, not to ask for help, not to complain, just to say, I got things handled, I'd like to see you. He mailed a check to help with the tuition and wrote a short note, not lecture, not strings, just dad. The silence on the phone line didn't last long. His son's voice came back smaller than Frank remembered. I thought you didn't want us around, he said. Frank swallowed and told the truth. I was ashamed. I shouldn't have been. On Saturday they came. The house wasn't fancy, but it was solid again. The roof didn't leak, the porch didn't creak like it might give up. Frank grilled burgers like he used to, and for the first time in years, the laughter in his yard didn't sound borrowed. Across town, Leon Adler kept owning half the real estate in the city, but he never came back to Frank's streets. Paperwork was louder than power when power couldn't prove its history. Frank still didn't believe in miracles, but he did believe in chances, and when he sat on that repaired porch with his family inside the house, he finally understood what the camper really gave him. It didn't just pay a debt, it gave him his name back. That's it. Thank you for watching my video. Please share in the comments how do you feel about it, what was wrong, what was right, and I do appreciate you watching my videos. Please subscribe and see you next time.